We're in Thorton, Kentucky, looking for Roy Conway, and Leo's found him apparently. Oh, I see it. It's a big stone. So many mulleins.
Old ones here too.
So Roy's wife lived 41 years longer than him. That little bench. So Roy Conway was the sheriff of Pike County in 1950. He was lured from his home on a false call for duty and assassinated about 11 o'clock at night on July 28, 1950. The ones who did it were Tommy Vanover and Hubert Vanover. They were half brothers. They were convicted of the crime and sentenced to life imprisonment. So court testimony, some papers that I found, I'll read a little bit of it to you just to give you an idea of what happened that night. Mr. Conway was shot in the back under a streetlight in front of his home and died instantly. A neighbor heard the shot and then someone running through a narrow dark passageway between her house and a garage. Her son and a police officer quickly discovered footprints and found a German army rifle in the bushes in the passageway. It had the odor of freshly exploded powder. Guards were placed at each end to prevent intrusion. The next morning, a plaster cast was made of a very distinct impression of a rubber tennis shoe, the heel of which had sunk well into the earth at an angle a foot makes when it turns to one side. It is reasonable conclusion, considering these facts and the location of the body, that the assassin was concealed near the front entrance of the narrow passageway between the buildings. A bloodhound picked up the trail but lost it at the parking lot. Sheriff Conway had been very diligent in enforcing the law against gamblers and bootleggers. It was brought out by defendant's counsel that threats had been made against him and that he had been previously shot at. Also, that as he prepared to go out on that fatal night, his wife warned him of danger, but nevertheless, he went on. He had said he had been offered $75,000 to resign his office. The testimony of the defendants is that Tommy's business, which is one of the ones that shot him, was that of raising and racing coon dogs and swapping pistols. His brother Hubert added to his vocations that of playing poker. Hubert was a barber and in the dog business as well. It appears, however, their principal business was dealing in illegal liquor. Pike County being a local option territory, they had a place in the county at Rocky Gap for that business. They'd been raided 7 or 8 times by the sheriff and his deputies, and the officers were fired upon while destroying a moonshine still in the neighborhood. Hubert had recently filed a civil suit against Roy, charging an illegal search on his premises about a month before the killing. While the officers were up in that neighborhood, Hubert Vanover and his father John Vanover came along in a car. According to the officers, Hubert was drunk and driving and tried to run them down. An officer shot at a tire, and there was considerable shooting between the occupants of the car and the officers. Finally tracked down, the car was loaded with whiskey, but according to the defendants, the officers had fired upon them without any reason whatsoever, of course, and had treated them unjustly. When they, it kind of sounds familiar, don't it?
Yeah.
To like today's, and you never know, honestly. So, I'm not taking sides, I'm just saying. Yeah. I'm just reading the story, I'm just here. When they'd been taken to jail, they sent a message that night to notify Tommy. He was received by Tommy standing in the door with a pistol in his hand, and when the message identified himself, the defendant said, "It's a good thing you hollered. I'm expecting them up to raid, and when they come, I'm going to give them a warm welcome." They worded things different back then. It's kind of hard to read because we don't talk like this anymore.
Yeah.
There were other occasions of similar character, particularly one where the officers were fired upon from an ambush as they approached the Vanovers' place on a search warrant. On a Saturday night, about 2 weeks before the killing, Tommy Vanover checked his pistol with the proprietor of the dance hall. On that occasion, being asked by a friend why he carried the pistol, he responded, "Well, Roy Conway sent me word that he was going to kill me, and I'm going to protect myself." In the afternoon of the night of the murder, both brothers were at the Conway corner on 2 occasions. First, about 1 o'clock, and later about 6 o'clock. They may well have been viewing the situation, but they say they were at the garage in the used car lot, seeing about getting a car, but that they talked with certain people. Those people denied talking to them, which kind of debunked their story. They were obviously casing Roy's house. So here we have Conway's census in 1950, which would have been the year he died, actually. It has him at 43, born in New York, lived on Hibbard Street, county sheriff. It has him, his wife Esta, who's 37, a daughter Anna, Colleen, Judy, and Nancy, who was only 7. And then Louisa, I assume, was probably his mother, because her last name's Conway. So this would be his death certificate. It's kind of sloppy. I think it says intestinal hemorrhage. Gunshot, of course, right here. Something cavity. So he was shot in the stomach. Instant death. And he was put in Thorton Cemetery. So let's go back in time a little bit. Here, Roy is 13 years old. He lives in Burning Fork in Pike, Kentucky on Coode Creek Road. His father's William Conway and, Louisa, who's living with him in the other census. He has 3 brothers. In the late afternoon, they bought 2 pairs of what are commonly called tennis shoes. I don't mean to laugh, but this is actually like 1950. Like tennis shoes were like a new thing.
Yeah.
Having rubber soles and canvas tops. The sizes were 8 and 11. The defendants testified they bought these shoes to hunt with and to use in training and washing their dogs in the creek. After getting the shoes, they went by bus to the home of a friend 8 or 10 miles in the country and borrowed his car. They had spent the night in the apartment of 2 girls to which Tommy had a key and had frequently stayed there, but Hubert had not. When the young ladies left for a dance about 9:30, they left Tommy alone sitting on the porch. He was drinking. He said he didn't feel like going with the other girl. When the girls returned around 1 in the morning, they noticed 2 pairs of tennis shoes on the porch. They found both men fully dressed, asleep in their bed. Several witnesses had seen Hubert on the street about 10 or 10:30 that night. This apartment was within 7 minutes walking to the Conway's corner, and of course, much quicker by car. There was a telephone convenient to the apartment from which the false call might have been made. The next morning, on a search of the apartment, the officers found 2 pairs of tennis shoes, size 8 and 11, in the bathroom. They were wet. One had bits of soil on the bottom, indicating they'd been worn recently. 2 revolvers, fully loaded, were concealed in a small table. Several shotgun shells were also found. Some of the bullets had sharp end and a round point clipped off and a small hole hollowed out in the end. Such bullets explode or split into fragments in the body. An X-ray examination of the body of Mr. Conway showed that a bullet struck him and exploded into fragments The long story short, the circumstantial evidence pointed perfectly that the brothers were guilty. They were both given life in prison. I'm not sure if they actually did life in prison, but that's where this story ends, and this is where Roy's story ends. One of Roy and Esta's daughters was named Judy, and she actually went on to do great things. Judy Patton, First Lady of Kentucky. Judy Jane Conway Patton is an American activist for women's safety and child abuse prevention. She served as the First Lady of Kentucky from December 12, 1995 until December 9, 2003, during the tenure of her husband, former Governor Paul E. Patton. Judy was born in Pike County, Kentucky as one of the 4 daughters born to Roy and Esta Conway. Roy Conway was a businessman and former state legislator who had been elected as sheriff on a platform to clean out bootleggers and to stop corruption that spoiled the reputation of our beautiful mountain town. He was assassinated by bootleggers Tommy and Hubert Vanover in front of his family home July 28, 1950, at the age of 44. Esta Conway was originally from the Kraft and Wright families of Letcher County, so I didn't really realize this, but being of the Wright family in Letcher County, she would be related to John Wright, which we did a video on, who has all kinds of books and different things wrote about him. So I'll put a link to that in the description. But he has a lot of descendants. He had more than one wife. And very interesting character there. She attended Moorhead State Teachers College and continued her husband's work and was the first female sheriff in the town, but was defeated as she ran for a special election to complete her husband's former term. So that's interesting. After Roy was murdered, Esta actually tried to step in as the first female sheriff, but she was defeated. After her father's death, the Conway family opened a small grocery store where the children were expected to work part-time. Mrs. Conway, which would be Esta, offered credit to women and families in need. While completing college, Mrs. Conway would welcome women and families into her home. I assume this is still Esta. In 2002 interview, Patton, which would be Judy, expressed how important these actions were in rescuing women from danger and creating meaningful connections among women in the town. Many times, she would bring women and children home. Mama had this great networking system in Pikeville. The women she got a job, the kids she put in school, almost until Mama passed away. She was getting letters from women saying that they would have been lost if she hadn't been there to help them out. So I thought if I could do anything to make her proud of me, I would carry on her work. Esta Conway died on April 29, 1991, at the age of 78. She was central in shaping her daughter's activism. During the Appalachian War on Poverty, Patton was constantly at her home with her mother, caring for and nurturing the women her mother brought home to their eastern Kentucky home. So that's really interesting. It's amazing kind of how horrible things that happen can sometimes shape and put into motion things that wouldn't have happened possibly. How many lives were maybe saved by Esta and Judy? And would that have came to pass if Roy hadn't been killed? So that's why we came out today, just to visit Roy and kind of get his name out there in the story and do what we do. So we hope you enjoyed this, and if you liked our story, feel free to subscribe and help support our channel to grow. And we're going to head back home, and from Thorton, Kentucky,
Hillbilly's out.
Goodbye. Hillbilly's out.
I'm I'm sorry for the things I said. I never meant to break you the way you broke. In the distance over bridges, I hear you calling out through the smoke.